matter who you are, where you are, what your choices have been, and what karmic timelines and contracts you have journeyed, the light is calling for the reunification of all aspects of life in this realm now. It is calling for the cleansing of all polarities. It is calling for the rising of all sacred heart centers now. All are being summoned home to the greater light now.
Hi, and welcome to Whole Soul Mastery's Live Well, Live Whole podcast series, where we focus on mind, body, spirit, wellness, fitness, and wholeness, and inspiring others to integrate polarity within in order to alchemize and remember our true light. I'm Marie Mohler. I'm an author, channel, and a host of the Whole Soul Mastery podcast series. And joining us today is Carol Shwetz, who is a beautiful soul and who I have had the immense privilege of knowing and connecting with for a couple of years now. She is a veterinarian, a teacher, a healer, an animal lover, a wisdom keeper, a nature appreciator, and a courageous traveler in the hero's journey. And so I'm so excited to be here with you today, Carol. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for that lovely introduction, Maria, and I am so honored to be here.
You know, as I was preparing for this conversation today, I was really tapping into your energy and our many connections over many months of time where, you know, you really felt drawn to animals and to their energy and, you know, to your connection with them. And I wonder if you could just start us off maybe by sharing a little bit about when you had the awareness that you had that connection with animals and where that led you.
Well, I grew up on a farm from a farming family, and animals were always a part of our lives, and we were all part of the circle in life. And so actually that you say when I became aware of animals, to me, it's more like I was surprised that you could not be aware of animals. And when I went to school, a lot of things changed for me in my relationship with people and how people treated one another and how they treated themselves. And it was very confusing. And I would always continue to come back home to the farm and spend time with my animals, because in that world, I really understood what was happening. I could communicate with them at a level and take care of them, and there was sort of magic in just that presence with them, and also that stillness with them. There weren't a lot of words. That was more just a feeling of being in their presence. There was a lot of peace and a lot of quiet, a lot of silence, and I was very comfortable in that as a child. So by going to school, or even the kind of emotional turmoil in my own family, was just very confusing to me. So that connection to animals was a part of me that was true. There was some kind of a truth in there, even though I certainly couldn't language it for years.
Right. Right. It is amazing that they do offer us that. It's an exquisite grounding and like a place of home inside ourselves when we spend time with them. I'm surrounded by animals in my life. I have 2 dogs and 3 cats, but I have a whole family of deer, and I know a family of possums and raccoons, and a lot of nature all around me, and even the trees, you know, all of nature. And the same thing for me is that when the world around me, even as a child, got to be that too much feeling, when either I was overstimulated or confused or just needed a reset. And again, I didn't have this language. We weren't raised with the language of sentience and deep heart connection and that, you know, that the language of feelings, basically. We weren't really given that language as children in our world culture. And yet many of us still recognized it. And I found it too in nature. And I have many memories of connecting with animals. My parents had a farm. We didn't live on the farm, but we had a farm of like 80 acres here on the East Coast of the United States for a number of years, and other local farmers would rent the farmland and grow corn and other crops on the land. And so, but between animals and also just connecting with the energy of land and natural spaces, it was like a portal into another place and space and time inside myself whenever I would visit the farm. And all of the animals, there was such life force there. And it was very grounding and resetting. And our world in many ways has gotten disconnected from that, of course, over the last few decades with the increase in technology and all of our gadgets and all of the distractions. It's amazing how centering, just connecting with animals physically, but even just as a consciousness, tuning into the energy of animals from wherever anybody is who's listening to this, there's something profoundly resetting and grounding in that connection. There's a presence in nature that I think much of humanity has forgotten. And you seem to be really tapped into that in your life early on. And it's such a gift. It is such a gift. Sounds like it really helped you in your journey. Yeah.
You use the words grounding and centering, and those are all, to me, and presence. And to me, those are all very beautiful ways to language it. But even as a child, there's this pragmatic way that animals are and the way they engage in their environment. They love to feel good in their bodies. They love food. They love to play with one another, and they take care of one another. And so that's so pragmatic. Like, those are just basic, simple, pragmatic characters and qualities in life that really nurture life at so many different levels. There's a sense of enjoyment. And I think when we watch it, like you're indicating, there's a grounding and a centering, and perhaps a reminder to us that this is life force. This is what life,
Yes.
This is how life force interacts with itself and interacts with its environment. And that's very soothing to the soul and very simple. And that simplicity just kind of washes over us and reminds us that we are part of that life as well. And that is happening to us as well, as we have the ability to offer it, and we have the ability to receive it. And nature shows us that interchange and that exchange all the time, right?
It does. And it's so, I think that energy of all that you just shared and that feeling of presence, because it's a skill that is innate. We have this ability inside all of us to be fully and completely present in the present moment. That's part of our root chakras gifts to us, actually, is to be in the power of the present moment. And it's as if animals, that's like the only space they live in, is the power of the present moment and that authenticity in the present moment. And I don't see animals really apologizing for themselves or forgetting who they are the way humans do. In fact, they invite us to spend time with them. I think that's why it feels good to spend time with them, because they reflect to us that it's okay to be who we are. It's okay to love ourselves and be in that present space and that deep state of interconnection and listening for instructions from within, because they're not communicating verbally, not as much as humans do. Their communication is with the much more subtler fields of energy that because we have so many skills as human beings, and we have this outer world, and we have lots of distractions in that outer world, we forget our first language, which is sentience, which is this state of feeling and being present. And how amazing that must have been for you to have that in your early childhood experience and growing up, and to be able to recognize the gift that when life was confusing at home or at school or wherever, you had an inner knowing, you were tapped into that inner language, that inner feeling state that you knew, I feel good here, right? Animals offer that to us.
And the other part that is, I am continued to be reminded of it again and again, especially with my work in horses, as they continue to remind us that they are sentient beings, and they do have thoughts and feelings, and it comes out in their behaviors. and that we often can't miss in how they behave. But they also remind us that we too have thoughts and feelings, and that those thoughts and feelings have value. Every one of us, our thoughts and feelings are of value. And that because if we start to view them as sentient beings, they have thoughts and feelings, and they are of value, of equal value to our thoughts and feelings. And that's very beautiful when you realize that. And also that that's a connection, and that's everyone on earth, every being on the earth has that perspective and that privilege and that honor of having thoughts and feelings.
It is that, coming up on for our nonprofit with Whole Soul School and Foundation, it's interesting that we're talking about this morning, because our theme for next month is going to be the inner guidance, or the inner GPS. And I think those thoughts and feelings are very much a part of this like built-in guidance system that we have. And, children, young children, really young children still have it. They come in, they have that glow and that curiosity, and they're listening, and they're, developing so brilliantly. And they listen for the cues. I'm hungry. I'm sad, right? They're joyful. They want a toy. They're listening to that. And at a certain point in the conditioning of this world, we learn to override some of that guidance. We learn that it's more important to behave, or it's more important to perform, or exhibit certain behaviors that get reinforced, than it is to listen to that anymore. And then we can get into all kinds of rabbit holes if we talk about the educational systems, but there's a lot in our world that conditions us away from that inner guidance system. And yet animals, if you just watch them through hundreds of thousands of years, they still are authentic and true to those guidance systems. And I think humanity is in a time, and we're in a time of great change, and it can be uncomfortable change, it can be uncertain change, and we're being summoned back to that inner guidance system, that listening to our thoughts and feelings, and learning how to value them again, instead of our conditioned behavior, which is often to override them. When you say, it's powerful.
My goodness, you have said so many things in your comments. There is so much to unpack.
Yeah.
And, I just, from my perspective, from what I've seen with the animals and people, is that there's the inner compass that you talk about. We almost trade away the inner compass from our connection to source, or to the divine source, to an inner compass that is of human conditioning and our collective thinking and patterns. So it becomes very confusing to follow that path, that inner guidance, because we actually will have two, from my perspective, we will all have like these two compasses that are working all the time. Mm-hmm. And even the inner compass that's in alignment with human conditioning, it feels good to follow that as well. So it becomes very confusing when you talk about the GPS and that inner guidance, because I believe we have these two are always operating. And the nice thing with the animals is they don't have that so much. The more they get involved in domestication, yes, they do. They start to become more involved with the collective mind and human thinking, for sure. The other thing is that when you talk about, and people will say this with children, that animals and children will demonstrate behaviors that are suppressed by their owners and the parents. The children will act out and behave as their parents are feeling. And I find that with animals as well, especially horses. And when a horse begins to misbehave, it catches everybody's attention. But often there is a connect, because they're 1,000-pound animals, and when they're misbehaving, safety becomes an issue. But a lot of times they are demonstrating what they're feeling in the energetic atmosphere anyways. And of course, the emotional content is really energy, is that energetic template that they feel. And so even though it's very interesting, because the human may feel that they're suppressing, and sometimes they don't even know what they're suppressing. It's so cloaked and it's so dark and it's so deep, and they don't want to allow those feelings to come to the surface. But the horse knows, and the horse will demonstrate that and bring it out. And it's very interesting what the person does with how the horse behaves, because it's often a reflection of how they are behaving towards themselves with those feelings and those thoughts. And the horses amaze me as to what they will I'll use the word poultice, but they will always amaze me. They recognize what level that person needs to be, and to be a better version of themselves. They will know where to start. They will know what it is that needs to be done. Their wisdom and their intelligence and their connection to the greater whole has a way of communicating with them that always amazes me.
It is so profound, and it's such a gift when we just open to become willing to see and to feel them in this way. As an intuitive, and I've referenced I have these animals, and I feel the world around me in general. I have this story of one of my dogs came to me. She's the mother of my other dog, and she was still at the breeders. And she came to me in a dream 3 times, and I don't dream. So when I get a dream, I get a message. Basically, I'm messaged more than I dream. And she came in a dream 3 times and was very succinct and clear. I want to be a part of your family. I'd like to come to your family, was in the dreams. And by the 3rd time I received that dream, I finally said it out loud to my family. And of course, my daughter was like, yes, yes, of course, right? And so, and I did reach out to the breeder, and I let her know. I said, I'm feeling like I have this connection with our dog Leo's mother, and I feel like she's meant to be a part of our family. I have no idea what your protocols are, if she's already, meant to go to another family. But she actually said, I absolutely believe in signs, and she's absolutely going to come to your family. And she had another litter or 2 to have for the breeder. And then she did come to our house, and she didn't communicate. The minute I said yes, she could come, there were no more messages, because she'd gotten, she'd had the conversation she needed to have, right? She's still very efficient to this day in that way. She's not verbose, she really communicates exactly what she wants and how she wants it. And a week before she came, we went to pick her up, I had one more dream, and she showed me herself sitting on the couch in one particular spot, and just looked at me and showed me that that was her place. Okay. And when she came into the house and we brought her home for the very first time, she walked in the house and she went straight to the couch, and she went straight to that spot. And and she has been just a glorious being, and in our family, and so grateful. She'd never been in a family environment, not from what she had been raised in. And so it was the greatest blessing to have that experience with her. It's such an intimate connection with another soul. And it's so easy when you're open to it, when you're open to the gifts of this level of communication. They're talking to us all the time, and they know who we are. And, I would say, in my thinking, we went and got her. And of course, she did ask to come to our family. But in many ways, I think she knows that she was meant to come to our family to help us learn many things with her. And it has been the most beautiful experience. And, what would you say is something, we've been talking about sentience, we've been talking about, this inner guidance system. We've been talking about that mirror of kind of presence inside ourselves, and the gifts of our authenticity, and that deeper connection that's beneath all the surface stuff in our lives, the real marrow of life and life force. I'm curious if you could, if you've had some, any particularly poignant messages that you've received from the horses specifically, or other animals, something that you might be willing to share of an experience you had of a communication with them.
For me, there's of course a number, and as a veterinarian, I have the honor and privilege of walking animals over on the Rainbow Bridge, right? When owners have decided that it is time, or whatever the circumstances are, veterinarians have the gift and the privilege of euthanasia. And animals continue to share with me the transition of death, that it is basically more life, that it is not an ending, and how many humans struggle with death and its endpoint when it's not that. And the animals in that space, when I am in that space with animals and we're going through the process, it always amazes me the emotions that come up in people and their owners. And the animals have just created this, almost have created this experience and this moment for their owners to experience the beauty of passing and crossing over, and to be in the presence of loved ones when that happens. And that again and again is horses, our dogs and cats will challenge the owner's perceptions of what it means to die. That's a very common theme. Wow. which is really interesting. And one of the other ones that continues to come up again and again is the joy of feeling well in their bodies. Just the joy of life, like to have life flowing through your body, not to have resistance, and just the joy of living in this environment and being present now that you live in a body and it can do so many things for you, and it just has so many sensations. And that's another one that continues to come, the quality of life, the joy of quality of life. And I find as time has gone on, animals are experiencing more and more, as a veterinarian, delivering more and more palliative care, even hospice care, perhaps to demonstrate back to the owners the quality of life is very, very important to animals. And they're like thriving and then dead, you know, like they don't do palliative or hospice very gracefully or very, very well. Because there's something lost in that connection when that happens, when they're not allowing that life force to flow through them, and it creates these illnesses, or there's emotional, I guess, a baggage, for lack of a better term, but there's an emotional template that is creating the fertile grounds for illnesses.
That's so powerful. I really connect with what you're saying. I was on the board and was a volunteer at an amazing farm animal rescue, a sanctuary, really, that is a template and an energy of oneness in the world here in North Carolina, about 30 minutes away. And that's what we've seen is and there's alpacas and llamas and horses and goats and beautiful beings, that many of them had come from abusive situations. And, you know, to your point, I've seen two things in my experiences there. One, when they've come from a place of experiencing pain and abuse and suffering, and not the joy in their bodies that you're describing. With the friend of mine that started that farm, that launched that vision into form and created that space that these animals could come to. The minute they arrive, they're interested in returning to the joy that you describe in their bodies, and that they know that suffering and the pain that they were experiencing isn't who they are, and they're more than willing to let it go when they're given the energetic support to do that. And it's incredible how, I would say rapidly, I'm not the person there every single day tending to all of their needs, but I can say as an observer, it was amazing to see how each of them that I've seen arrive there begin to thrive in a relatively short period of time, because thriving is their natural state, and they know that. And that's what that farm in particular is transmitting, that frequency to the planet. That is, you know, one of the missions and messages of this beautiful farm animal sanctuary. And the second thing is true, is when they're not experiencing that joy in their body, it is a pretty quick transition. You know, my friend does everything she can do to support them and assist them on all levels with veterinary care, homeopathy, energetic support, you know, and all the things that she does to tend to these beautiful animals. But when they're ready to go, they do go pretty quickly. I resonate with just the experiences I've had with that, with what you're saying, is that they're alive and then they've passed. And to me, it's like what you described in the horses is what I experience as a channel. And I also experience every night when I go to sleep. I'm awake and I'm asleep. Like I go into a different dimension, right? I leave this form and I become spirit at night in my sleep, and I transition into another form for that period of time. And I journey to many places in my sleep. And all of us, you know, have this experience. You could say almost we die to ourselves, the version that we were today, every evening, and we reset every morning. And the same thing is channeling. I'm in one state of consciousness and I move into another state of consciousness when I channel. And then I return to the state of consciousness, but expanded in a new way from who I was before. And I think animals seem to be very tapped into that. And sounds like they're messaging us in many ways to not have a fear of death. It is really a transition into another form, a new life, right?
And I agree that they are also reflecting back to us that thriving is also our natural state. It's not only their natural state. And when given the resources and things will change in their environment, they can reach that state very quickly. And one of the best visuals that I was shown about their passing through was basically a pet door. You know, like that's how different it is for them. Like it is basically, you know, they're in the house and then they're outside in the yard, or that's death. Like that's death to them. It's that simple. It's that beautiful. They just choose a different environment and a different costume, and off they go again, right? But their levels of it, everyone is wearing a costume, but they have the intelligence within animals is remarkable. And when you communicate with them, it's very, very remarkable. And their level of consciousness is very high. Their costumes are unique. They don't have the ability to voice language, which would be very interesting for any one of us to be in that situation, to be very highly intelligent and yet not be able to communicate it through our voice. So they look for other avenues to communicate. But yeah, death is a very dear thing for them, and their lives are almost like love letters to life and to our lessons. They use their bodies. They're not attached to, we were talking about this earlier about the message. They're not near as attached to their bodies when their owners and in their situations as they are to the message that their lives are communicating. And they're living that message, which is really beautiful. And it's like they have this, it's like a love letter to us. Their lives are like a love letter to us. And how we unravel it is different for every person, of course, because the message is different for every person. But, and whether they're in these situations where they're suffering or there's pain or whatever is going on in their life, whether they're need rescuing, whether they're in fighting situations like for dogs or whatever, it's a love letter to us, you know, like it's a message to us. And I think when we see that happening through an innocent animal or through a child, we seem to be able to integrate that message better than when we see it in an adult human being. When we see it embedded in these innocent animals, the message is just so much more poignant to us.
It is. I think I might have said earlier, it's like a first language. We do understand this, and it is such a gift to feel them. I just experience it every day. And I even have, you know, like I said, these wild animals in my yard as well, who pass through in their migratory patterns. And they clearly, you know, but I can tell they know they feel safe at our house. You know, we have herds, and many of them have had their babies on or near our land here. And we're in, you know, we're not in a city, but we're not on a farm either. We're in town in a little sort of subdivision, but very wooded. And so, you know, I can feel their awareness. It's amazing. I watch their ears, how they hear. We have, for years, I fought with my compost bin and the possums and raccoons that always outsmarted me no matter what I did. You know, I would wrap it up at night and they'd have unwrapped it by morning and had a feast. And then we had some deer that came here with injuries and hit by cars, you know, passing by our yard. And I think because that energy of respect and sentience and oneness that I think I hold in my consciousness, that is likely palpable to them and they feel safe to reside here. I know other neighbors that run them off from their yards because they're like, they're going to eat my flowers. You know what I find? Because I have this level of respect and engagement with them, they rarely ever eat my flowers. They are very respectful, and my compost scraps, I don't fight it anymore. I just put them out and, you know, nature, they either recycle into the earth or, you know, the animals around me have a snack. And there's something that's been beautifully exchanged over the years in just the healing medicine of the connection that we've shared. And like you said, those love letters, I feel love letters almost from the different moms who've come through my yard and birthed their babies, and several generations of their children live around me. And it's part of my day. You know, some people ask me, do I meditate? I would say I connect with nature. That is my meditation. Like I don't specifically, I go into channeling states, but my meditation is that taking a breath and connecting and appreciating and seeing them. You know, they're often not even seen. Deer that pass through people's yards. And I even had that in one of, I can go on and on, but I have a lot of animal stories. But I wrote a book early on in maybe 2008 or 2009 called Cosmic Wealth. And on the cover of that book, there's a picture of a hawk that had perched on the cross outside the church where my kids attended preschool. And one day I was dropping them off at school and I saw this magnificent hawk sitting on top of this cross. It was so majestic and it took my breath away. It was so powerful in the grace of its presence. And I had this exchange, like I feel them. I know them. They're another me, like the phrase in Lakesh, right? I am another you. I felt the hawk as that energy of I am another you. Do you know, I went in, I dropped my kids off. I was still so moved by that experience, expecting full well that the hawk would have flown, you know, off. But it was still there when I got out, and people were coming and loading their kids into the preschool to drop them off for the day. Not one looked up and even saw that. I had to actually catch someone's attention. I said, do you see that? Do you see that hawk up there? It's magnificent. And people were like, oh, that's creepy. That was the response I got from some people. Like, I guess it was ominous to them. I don't know, that was their vibe. Not at all the experience that I was having. And then I remember thinking, this was before we had the iPhones that we have now. I might have had a flip phone at the time. And I thought, oh, I wish I had my camera because I'd love to take a picture if that would be okay with the hawk. And, you know, I went, 3 hours passed by. I grabbed a camera and I thought, well, if it's still there, I'll take a picture, but what are the chances of that? I came back and that hawk was still on the cross. I don't know if it had left and come back for the photo session or if it had stayed the whole time just patiently waiting, because it felt my intentions. It felt my connection. And that hawk is on the front cover of my book, which is also a message of like learning how to listen differently, learning how to tune in to this first language, this understanding, this interconnectedness that we have that doesn't require words. It doesn't require words. It requires connection, and it requires us to tune in deeper. And I'd imagine you just have so many of these experiences. Do you mainly work with horses? Is that?
Now I do. Originally, I was in mixed animal practice for a number of years. And then I had an opportunity to work with dolphins. And then I eventually, turns out horses were my favorite, and I really enjoyed the work with horses. So then my interest went mostly, and I was busy enough with the horses. But I enjoy animals at all level. And your story is very, very touching because of the nobility of the animals. I think there's such nobility in all of them. And the other part I really wanted to add to your story is that how animals will connect to people wherever they are. They will, and I've seen that in a number of different cases where I've had animals have relationships with different people. And it amazes me as to that relationship with that same animal can be very different between two different people or three different. They meet the person where they're at every time. And they seem to know where that connection is. And so they are always reaching out to connect. However, it's like you said, the level of connection is basically led by us in some ways. They're drawing us in. They're connecting to whatever level we are willing to connect with them. But we're the ones that define that connection or have definitions of that connection, right? Or don't, if it's the case of a child. I mean, children are incredibly connected to animals because they yet don't have definitions of what that connection is going to look like, right? And, you know, children instantly go to tending and caring for animals and loving for animals because that's easy. That's the fantastic connection. But animals will connect, and they can be very complicated at whatever level the human starts at. They're willing to go there. What is, that's where they will start.
It's amazing. And how you describe that is that the animals are so intuitively present. They, across all species, it sounds like they all have that same way of being, that they can meet us where we are and what we need. And at the same time, I wanted to say, I know that over the years, I learned about animal medicine or animal totems and the particular qualities that any particular animal or bird might embody, that when they show up in our experience, they are also bringing sometimes that specific message. It's interesting. I just remembered that I have hawk over my shoulder here. This was taken in my yard by one of my sons when he was probably 10 or 11. And, but it captures that energy. And I talk about that in some of my videos for Frequency Writer, is that its talons are all about tearing away the illusions that we're living in, or that as a global collective, we're still experiencing. And the strength and the boldness of hawk is that acuity of vision that hawk has. And it's by embracing the gift of hawk's talons that it can be so clear and stealth and strong and in search of truth, if I would add some human words to that, right? The clarity of truth. And, you know, in your world, I'd imagine that, you know, when you have animals cross your path, wild animals and your land and where you are, you know, is that something also that you've tuned into as well? Do you call in sometimes the support of certain animals or their messages?
I don't give a lot of language to it. I enjoy their presence when they come through. It can be very, for me, because I've been there, very exhaustive to why are you here and what are you trying to bring me? And so I've kind of more, as time has gone on, I just enjoy their presence and trust that whatever is needed is going on. It's some exchange for me and connecting to me. And watch and observe what they're doing, how they're doing it, just like the motion of a bird in flight, or the communication as they're gathering to go south for the winter now, you know, the geese and their formations, and just to hear them talk to one another, or, you know, as they're flying, or to hear the purring of cranes as they're moving. And I live on the edge of a waterland, so there's so much diversity and the sounds, and I don't know exactly what's all going on, but just to immerse and marinate in that is just feels good. It just feels good. Yeah, and to appreciate, I was going to say that type of nature, to appreciate the flow within it and the health within it and the thriving within it. Like the deer don't limp. They are not arthritic. You know, they don't have the problems, the modern day diseases that we see in our domestic animals. And so when I spend my time in nature, I am just so enthralled and revel in the health of that animal, like how healthy that animal is, that the coat of that deer, that shiny coat, that level of awareness, that brilliant awareness when they're they're mentally astute and in tune to their environment, which many times our domestic animals lose that level of awareness of what's going on around them. I just revel in nature and that health and that thriving and that zest for life that often, as we go into domestication, that does not happen in our domestic animals. And almost for me, it's like I bring that level of thriving back to the animals in domestic care, that they were meant to thrive. And why are you here? Like, why are you in my presence? You're not meant to be ill. Like, you're not meant to be ill. And so when I am in nature and these animals like hawks or pelicans or those animals or frogs or spiders, the cobwebs that are around, and it's to that connection of what's going on in their lives is so beautiful and so thriving and so full, and they're expressing so fully who they are. To me, that's just medicine for my soul that I'm hoping I can carry with me as a type of a medicine that then when I work with patients and their people, that returns, that can be felt.
Yes, and in that way, I think you're even a channel of that medicine then to the people who are the stewards or the owners of those animals. I would imagine as a veterinarian that, you know, your patient is the animal, but there's another big component to that, is that how are you interfacing with the owners who may or may not have the level of consciousness and be tuned in at the level of what you're seeing and the messages you're receiving. I would imagine that's a challenge in modern day veterinary care, right? Is to have this intuitive connection and to tap into those deeper messages and what the animal's really communicating. And then obviously not always having the ability to speak openly to the stewards of these magnificent creatures. What is that like for you? How do you make that translation as a medium or the bridge between those two worlds?
Oh my goodness, it's been a life journey that I continue to hopefully master and continue to improve upon and learn to navigate. Because when I went, to veterinary school, many of the things that I know now was not taught in veterinary school, or I had to unlearn. And when I graduated from veterinary school, my animals became the teachers. And that was very kind of confusing to navigate at first, because what they were asking for was very different than what the books were saying. And so when I started practicing, I would stand in the presence of an animal and I would get different information. And it was like I was reading a book, or there was information that would come to me. It was like I had opened some kind of a book. And I was really confused because it was not like the books that I had learned or had on my shelf. And it was really very confusing to navigate those waters. And then it got even muddier because their owners were also a big part of their environment and a big part of their health. And that became more difficult to navigate because I'm not a therapist and I'm not a counselor. And it wasn't the animals were fine. It was what was going on with their person, what was bothering their person emotionally, that was then manifesting or being demonstrated in the illness of the animal. That was very difficult for me to understand that, yet nonetheless, that tended to be where the work was. And so I was more just in awe of what was going on. I didn't know what to say because I get this information. So I would didn't know what to do. So I just stand in this space. I'd like to say I was holding space or presence, but I wasn't. I just didn't know what to do. But in that moment, it was like the owners would begin to speak and to bring up they would bring these events up that seemed to be like totally not relevant to what was going on. And they would have these emotions would bubble up, and they would tell these stories, and they would cry. Men would get angry, women would cry most of the time. That was and there was like a very cathartic process that would be going on. And the animals were like, they were relieved. They would show signs of relief. Horses would lick and chew. And that's when I knew something really important was going on. And then it was, and the owners would of their animals, it was also amazed me how much they intuitively knew what their animals needed, right? So if their animals needed anything, I would just listen, because the answers would come forth within them. And within me, there would be a piece that would resonate that's it. That's it. That is exactly what that animal needs. So it was a very big learning process for me as well. And, also discovering that, people, or humanity, a lot of times we take care of animals the way we think they should be taken care of, but that's not necessarily what the actual state of being is in their lives. And so their humanity, or the humans, in their many forms that appear by animal size, are very, very important to the environment of the animal. And subsequently, they are a part of the environment of the animal, especially their emotional weather, and it directly influences the animal, directly influences the health of the animal. And I think in time, science, well, it is starting to reveal that, but with time, it's going to become even more and more scientifically proven to be that is the truth.
It is so amazing. And to have the skills and the intuition inside yourself to allow yourself to have the space for the awareness that you cultivated in your practice. It has been the uncommon journey, I would say, right? But it's becoming more common. Would you say there are more physicians, veterinarians, essentially, who are becoming more aware? Or do you still feel it's quite rare to find others like you who listen the way you do?
Oh, it's becoming increasingly common. There's a lot of confusion, and I remember that state very well, where you're getting different information and you're in conflict between what's the best interest of the animal, what's in the best interest of the person. And in today's economic times, you're also, well, what's in the best interest of my business as well. And sometimes those answers can be very different. And so there's a lot of confusion, internal confusion, that really ends up being, and veterinarians do struggle with mental health now more so than ever. And I think that is in part, that's all wrapped up into that going through that confusing period is, versus focusing on health versus focusing on disease. And disease, you continue to focus there, it just never goes, it just is this endless tar pit.
The loop, right?
It just continues. Disease is lack of ease in the body, and the more you focus there, it just seems, versus asking the questions is how can we return to health? What does this animal need to be healthy? What resources in their environment? Because I don't heal the animals. No veterinarian heals, no doctor heals. The healing comes from within. I can facilitate the healing, perhaps by recognizing what resources are necessary for that animal or that being to return to health. And but it is basically returning to health and focusing on there versus patchwork and putting band-aids on symptoms, and because the body's always right. And even in animals, like inflammation, all those things the body does, the body is intelligent. It's been around for millions of years, and immunity is very different than vaccination. And I always, what is the animal's intelligence doing with this situation? And I find the more I step back and not interfere with that process, but support it and care for it, the healing is amazing. The ability the animal has to heal is amazing. And a lot of times en route, the healing of the person comes with that as well, because they will apply the same principles for their horse or their dog quicker and easier than they will for themselves, but eventually they themselves follow in that healing. And I have, numerous stories where, the horses has needed certain nutritional requirements, and the owners have the same requirements. And so to put all those ties together, I looked at horses and kind of given my assessment back, my clinical assessments back to the person, and the person will go, oh my God, you could have just described me. And so the link is undeniable. And as much as it was very awkward and uncomfortable for me, once I started to realize that that was in the healing, that was the healing, it gave me a lot more confidence to move into that space. And I think that's the same thing with many veterinarians or physicians when they can realize what true healing really means. And listening is a huge part of healing. And then moving forward and providing those resources, and they're simple. They can be really simple resources like movement, good diet, movement, water, breath. Like they're the healing, and those healing modalities are so broad, Marie. They take in so much. Like once you just good diet or movement, seems like the body just, it's such a simple answer, but the body seems to translate it in so many ways into what it needs to heal, instead of being very specific about supplements or those kind of avenues of therapy, right? And even in there's all kinds of static therapies, whether it's massage or chiropractors or whatever, but movement therapy is still holds the trump card, right?
It's amazing. There is like a sacred knowledge that's inside all of us, that if we create in the most positive way, if we can create the right conditions to support that to emerge and thrive, that is our organic nature, animals and human beings alike.
And what you say there is so beautiful, because animals seem to create the space, and I see that within the owners, is that description that you just put forward is what tends to emerge from the people in the space with their animals, is exactly what you're describing. That organic nature just seems to bubble up and seems to feel safe enough, maybe it's to present itself, right? And for my work, I just confirmed that that's the authentic you, and cheerlead that on, and it's amazing how it can change people's lives.
It is so true. And what I felt when you just said that, I felt the synergy between us and nature, and the synergy between us and animals, and those reflections of that organic essence that we truly are, that all of us are seeking to thrive. And I think it has been, when we say human conditionings, we can also say animal domestication, right? And the more we've conditioned and the more we've domesticated, the more we're messing with that original perfect divine design that knows how to heal itself, that knows how to support life and vitality. And it is incredible in the mirrors. Many people focus on, if they do, the mirrors all around us in the relationships we have, but animals and nature and the natural realms around us are also an incredible mirror for us. And when we take the time to cultivate the time and prioritize and value those conversations taking place between us and, essentially, I am in a very wooded area. I have massive rocks that encircle my house, and I have nature flowing through all the time, and I'm still just a mile away from town center. So it's not like I'm like deep in the country, but because I value that, I feel that synergistic communication system happening all the time. I'm connected with everyone and everything all the time through my awareness to be connected. And I think that is a choice, right, that many of us can make. And you have courageously and amazingly felt that connection as a child, must have nurtured it through your high school years and into even your profession, where you were very much schooled in the science of veterinary medicine. And yet you came out and into your practice and still listened intuitively and married the science and the art of veterinary medicine, would you say?
And it's also very much so, because it's an art. Every veterinarian is really artful. Every doctor is a form of art. Every healing is a form of art. But in doing that, it's like I have tools. I have collected a number of resources and tools and trainings through my attempts to help the animal. And in spite of all those tools, Marie, I will basically, it'll be the basic tools of what's bothering the owner, and also the basic tools of horses need to eat grass, like just simple things in their diet, or dogs, returning them as close as I can to what is in their natural world. And those will be my most powerful tools, if I can return some of those resources back to them and recognize what is interfering with their health, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, this is so beautiful. I feel like I can just enter a place of timelessness and awe at, connecting with another being who connects on this level with these animal beings, and the wisdom that they share with us and that they mirror to us that exists inside us. Like, we are all this incredible grace and this perfection. And when we can allow ourselves to see this way, it's another level of sight. But it is such a gift to connect with you, to hear, your experiences as you've journeyed the world of veterinary medicine and practicing the art of healing for many years. And I'm sure have seen many changes in the practice of veterinary medicine, and yet staying true to the basics of what supports these beings to thrive. And so I want to thank you for being with me today and just sharing from your heart in this conversation to enrich our listeners here at Whole Soul Mastery. Thank you, Carol.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with you, Marie. I am blessed. Thank you.
It's beautiful. And I want to invite our listeners to listen to this and other podcasts on YouTube, Whole Soul Mastery on YouTube. And I would invite you to visit us on our website at wholesoulmastery.com. So I send blessings to everyone. And until next time, have a great week. Namaste.